Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm as surprised as you are to see me up here at this podium addressing the Canadian Club. When Twee Brown called me and asked me to speak, my usual answer is no, 1,000 times no. But only those knowing Twee realize how persuasive she can be. The next issue is the topic, intuition as it applies to business. It's a difficult topic. I am a Queen's University civil engineering graduate, and our whole mandate is to deal with facts and solve problems. For us, intuition is considered a big word used by intellectuals and philosophers. On to the Webster's Dictionary for the real meaning of the word. As usual, there are several meanings. The one which applies most favorably is the act or process of coming to direct knowledge or certainty without reasoning or inferring, or immediate cognizance or conviction without rational thought, or revelation by insight or innate knowledge. Another is the power or faculty of attaining direct knowledge or cognition without rational thought or inference. And it goes on and on. But before we delve further into the topic and how it applies to business, I should tell you a humorous story which lightened things up a bit. 4 golfers were on the golf course and were struck by lightning. They all perished and arrived at the pearly gates. As it happened, each one received a thumbs down and a visit to Lucifer. After a week or so, Lucifer thought he should look in on his charges, and he found them laughing and happy, which concerned him greatly. "Doesn't the heat bother you down here?" he asked. And they all replied, "No, for us this is great. We're all from Kirkland Lake." Lucifer decided to change tactics and turned off the heat. In a few days, he checked with them again. He found them laughing and celebrating. So he asked them what they were so happy about. And they all replied, "The Leafs won the Stanley Cup. The Leafs won the Stanley Cup. Hell froze over." An amusing story, but getting back to the topic. What is everyone's intuition about the Leafs winning the Stanley Cup? I'm sure everyone has a gut feel, and not based on actual facts. So what is it? This year? 10 years? Or never? Back to the topic of intuition as applies to business. I can only relate to my experiences in my business life. Pardon me. I have been fortunate to have been involved in many different and varied businesses. I should list a few you might recognize. Consulting engineering and architecture, Spriet Associates, London Limited. Construction, London Builders, Norton Builders, London Limited. The automotive dealerships, Jaguar, BMW, Hyundai, Nissan, and Suzuki. Manufacturing, Vitec Corporation and Duralock Building Products. Property and land development, Yorkville Plaza, Hay Stationery, and Siegel Shoe Building redevelopment. Land development, Wee Lake Estates, Island Moorings. Mortgage broker, Charlton Building Credits. Secondary financing. Automotive racing, Bend Motorplex. And in technology, Purifics. And several others too numerous to mention. How can someone be involved in so many businesses, many of which are still going? One of the answers is good people. It is impossible to be successful without good people. Another reason is that I have been involved in the business scene around London for 50 plus years. I should belong to Entrepreneurs Anonymous as opposed to Alcoholics Anonymous. Let's talk about intuition as it applies to hiring people. When interviewing and evaluating people, you only hear what they want to tell you, but somehow they transmit other intangible qualities and leave impressions, although nothing is said. Making the right choice in the people you have provides a good foundation on which to build your business. Good intuition when hiring pays big dividends. Great employees should be treated as the treasure they are. They all have families, ambitions, aspirations, and needs. So at the end of the year, if you have been successful, share the wealth. When I talk about intuition and its role in business, I can only talk about my personal experiences as I think back over my life. I hope I don't bore you with all the details. At the time some of the events took place, intuition was hardly on my mind. Spriet Associates is big in the drainage business for many rural municipalities. And as the saying goes, sometimes when you're up to your ass in alligators, you forget they're there to drain the swamp. With intuition in mind, I should tell you the story of Vitek Corporation and let you develop your own intuition about what took place. Vitek Corporation originally started as a joint venture with Mastic Corporation of South Bend, Indiana. Vinyl siding production was in its infancy. The Canadian company was called Mastic Manufacturing Limited, and a new manufacturing plant was built in South London in 1973. We had a few aches and growing pains perfecting vinyl siding production. The first few years were definitely a struggle. However, in 1979, our partner, Mastic Corporation of South Bend, USA, triggered our shotgun buy-sell agreement. We were forced to either buy their shares or sell our shares. It was decision time. They had the manufacturing experience while we were the sales arm. After some thought and deliberation, we bought out our American partners, and that is a story in itself. Immediately following our purchase, the next year, our good old Canadian government came out with a CHIP grant to stimulate the economy and construction activity. If a homeowner spent any money on home improvements, the government provided a 1/3 grant to the homeowner. The result was that we couldn't produce siding fast enough, and we made a profit of $2 million. Wow. The next year, there was no CHIP grant. And again, making a profit was tough sledding. And we went on from there. Let's stop there. Was the decision to buy out our partners intuitive? In hindsight, maybe it was, although that thought never crossed my mind. In the late 1980s, the name of the company was changed to Vitek Corporation to eliminate conflicts with the American firm. We were both marketing products in the U.S. We were under the name of Andon Corporation, selling siding produced by Mastic Canada. The U.S. finally paid us a nice sum to change our name. In any event, times were tough and the market was very competitive in the late 1980s. Making a profit was very difficult. In 1989, we encouraged a large loss of $1,600,000, which disturbed my longtime banker greatly. He's here today, I hear. I met him. Hadn't met him. Such that they called for a standstill agreement, which in effect would close our doors should we not meet our projected income for the following year. In addition, the bank asked that I put up $2 million in additional security to allow us to proceed. Do you read tense in this new arrangement? Decision time was upon us. At the time, Vitek had 2 manufacturing plants, one in London and one in Mission, BC. We also had 3 warehouses in Australia and one in New Zealand. In all its operations, we were employing about 200 people. The job market in manufacturing in the late 80s was very bleak. Many companies were going through reorganizations, cutbacks, layoffs, laying off thousands of people trying to stay viable. The future for our people would be very bleak if I refused to provide the $2 million additional equity. Needless to say, I had a tense couple days, trying to decide what to do. In the final analysis, I put up security and immediately relieved our longtime general manager and our vice president of sales and marketing, the top 2 people in the firm, of their jobs. Severance pay for these 2 was about $200,000. In retrospect, money well spent. I decided not to replace them and ran with the people I had, elevating the role for key individuals. Amazingly, in our first year, we not only paid out the $200,000 in severances, bank charges, read this here, the bank charges of $5,000 to $6,000 a month, large legal fees, and other costs which normally help bring a struggling company down. And yet, we made a profit equal to the previous year's large loss, $1,600,000. Let's stop there. The question comes to mind, did intuition play a role in the scenario? There were many unknowns, yet we were doing things right. We had good staff, we had a great product, and great potential, yet we were in a very competitive market. The decision could have been a foolish one, but it was based on a gut feel and determination not to fail. Was my decision based on intuition or known parameters? I think probably a bit of both. How do you isolate intuition in analyzing a decision to proceed? The story of Vitek continues as each succeeding year we increased profits greatly, such that in 1995 we were approached by a large U.S. corporation asking if we would entertain an offer to sell. Have you ever met anyone who was not interested in knowing the worth of his company, even if there is no intention of selling? The potential purchaser made a very professional approach to arriving at what they thought Vitek was worth, based on sales and profits. Once they arrived at a price, they added a 10% premium as to their calculated value of the company to increase the attractiveness of the offer. But they awaited my reply. This was a new experience for me, never dreaming that someday I would be offered anywhere near the many millions on the table. Yep, despite that, I thanked them for their very generous offer, and I expressed the opinion that I didn't feel the offer paid for the future potential of the firm based on the plans we were making. They were somewhat taken aback, but indicated that if we could provide a basis for the increasing the offer, they would look at it objectively. We agreed to meet in Cleveland in 3 weeks to continue our negotiations. Let's stop there and talk about the decision to not accept their offer. Was my decision totally based on logic and reasoning, or was there an element of intuition, a reading between the lines, or a gut feel that if we could present our reasons, there was possibly more money available? Maybe it was just me being cocky, having risen from the ashes to the height of extreme profitability. To carry on the story, my accountant, Peter Holland, and I basically created a booklet entitled The Rest of the Story. We hired a private plane, and with my wife Helen, my lawyer Peter Lockyer, my accountant Peter Holland, and I flew from London to Cleveland for a 10 a.m. meeting in Cleveland. We made our presentation. The offer was increased by $8 million, and a handshake agreement was concluded by 12 noon. We then returned to the airport to fly back to London, completing what one could call a good day's work. The decision to ask for more was based on rational thought with perhaps a touch of tuition. How does one tell? I had no insight into their thought process. I was 60 years old, and the offer was generous and great for succession planning. Yet, for whatever reason I'm at a loss to explain, I felt there was more money available. Intuition? Perhaps. I hope I'm not boring you with a rather windy tale, but opportunities that have presented themselves over the years started with myself. Pardon me. A 26-year-old civil engineer who, of necessity, struck out on his own to offer consulting services to the local municipalities around London. At the time, I was working for a local consulting engineer whose life would be a novel in itself. A delightful individual whose personal life was a mess. As a result, the firm had financial difficulties such that when I left the firm, I was owed three and a half months back wages. At that point, my intuition suggested that if I was going to work for nothing, then I might as well work for myself. A brilliant deduction. There is a saying that adversity brings opportunity, and such was the case with me. My initial year started in March 1st, 1961, and my business career was launched. I'm happy to report that the consulting firm Spriet Associates has never had a slow year since inception. Hardly believable. Our clients are predominantly municipalities who are great to work for and also pay their bills. Nice people, good work, good money. I have another story to tell you, if you are not bored. About the same time as the sale of Vitek Corporation, I became interested in a stone-coated metal roofing product called Duralock. It was being produced in Cortland, Ontario, about 7 miles from where I was born. I had discussions with one of the owners and indicated to him that if they ever needed any help, to call me. I offered to discuss the progress of their operation with the intention of helping them if they needed it. As it turned out, the Cortland firm came calling and wanted to meet to ask if I would review their financial status and operations. To keep the story short, the firm was actually bankrupt and were in desperate financial straits. My chartered accountant and I investigated the operation and the financial disaster it was. Yet somehow I thought the firm had a chance to succeed. At about the same time I was completing the sale of Vitek Corporation, and after the sale, in appreciation to the employees for their good work, I distributed $2 million to the Vitek employees as final bonuses. I approached the key people of Vitek who now had some excess cash and invited them to join me in this new business venture. They did some market research and talked to some of our vinyl siding distributors and building supply outlets to get their input, related industry. They decided not to participate, and they all turned thumbs down on the opportunity. And who could blame them? The future prospects did not look rosy for the sale of steel roofing. Yet somehow I had the feeling that here was an opportunity. Could you call it intuition? I suppose you could. It was definitely a decision based on limited direct knowledge. After an in-depth review of its operation, we made a list of about 20 major changes they would be asked to make and to separate themselves from a construction firm that was entwined in their operation. If they were prepared to accept our conditions and restructure as requested, I would step in and I would pay $1 for 51% of the company. I would fund the operation by way of loans at reasonable interest rates. The company had no choice. It was either accept the offer or declare bankruptcy. In our first year, we had only the one originally designed panel, which had a tile look. But by the end of the year, we had introduced two new roofing panels, one a shake look and one a clean architectural look. Our first year, we lost $250,000. Our second year, we again lost $250,000. And then the profits started to show. We started in 1995 and had a few ups and downs along the way, yet continually improving to the stage that an American competitor approached us to buy our operation. Others also expressed interest. We were approaching 10 years in business. My position was that the first offer of $10 million would buy our firm. That's exactly what happened. The new purchaser only wanted to buy the manufacturing operation and not the sales, marketing, and installation division. That was fine with us, and to this day, the metal roof outlet in Cortland, Ontario remains and is thriving. The new owner's biggest customer is the metal roof outlet, which sells and installs metal roofing products throughout Ontario. Sounds so easy, doesn't it? But it was hard work by some very good people who made it happen. Was it intuition that set us off on this journey? Was it a gamble? It definitely was. Was it blind hope? Could have been. But initially, looking back, it was an intuitive decision to take the chance and tackle the opportunity the future presented. You will notice I am not enlightening you on some of my less successful ventures, which in many cases are based on an element of intuition rather than cold, hard knowledge and facts. Thank God you don't have time to listen to those. Each business has its own story, and I could keep you here for a long time. I think enough has been said about experiences, but I do have another very personal experience which in some ways may be an example of intuition in action. But before I start that story, I want to tell you a little human story which is a lead into my personal story. A salesman was out in an isolated rural area and had his car break down late in the day. And he trudged over to the nearest farm. I'm sure you heard some of these stories. Farmhouse to explain his problem and to get help. The farmer said that he would have to wait for service until the next day and offered him a meal and a place to sleep. Unfortunately, the salesman was required to share a double bed with the farmer's young son. As they were preparing for bed, the salesman noticed the young son kneeling beside the bed, and he thought, "Isn't that great? He's saying his nightly prayers." So the salesman promptly knelt down on his side of the bed, surprising the young man. The young man looked at him curiously and then said, "The pot's on this side of the bed." And that cute story reminds me of a time in my life when I was 16 years old. That's about 64 years ago. In the countryside where I grew up, many families lived in farmhouses which generally did not have central heating, but depended on wood or oil-fired stoves in the central room to heat the house, keep the house warm. During my elementary school years, I attended Sacred Heart Separate School in Langton, Ontario. Prayer was an integral part of our life. In those years, each winter, there would be several reports of entire families being lost in house fires throughout the countryside. I was particularly concerned that our family of 10 not be destroyed by fire. So every night, as I kneeled beside the bed, saying my nightly prayers, I would pray that our family would be spared such a fate. As it happened, one very cold February night, at about 1:30 in the morning, I was sleeping with my brother Roger in the upstairs bedrooms, no heat, along with my older brother Celeste. For some reason, I woke up, got out of bed, heard a crackling noise, and went downstairs to wake up my parents. We quickly got everybody up and frantically rushed around trying to save a few things. 5 minutes after I woke up, the upstairs was filled with smoke. The house burned to the ground, but we were all safe. There is a God. The question that arises is, was intuition a factor in what happened? Or was it, as I believe it to be, divine providence, an answer to my prayers? Certainly the mind was conditioned over the years to the probability. Yet I think back over my life, my family, and with all the blessings bestowed upon us, that I have received a lot of help from above. My life definitely has been very full. I have a sign on the wall in our little Florida condo which says, "The purpose of life is not to arrive well preserved at your gravesite, but to come sliding in sideways, yelling at the top of your voice, 'Holy shit, what a ride.'" In other words, life is an adventure, or it is nothing at all. Discussion of intuition and its role in life can be an interesting intellectual exercise. There is definitely conscious thought and also unconscious thought that occurs in our brains. Intuition I think is a product of both. If it feels right, it probably is. If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. When I broached the subject of intuition to my youngest son, Jeffrey, his reaction was that intuition was really just common sense, gathered from all aspects of our being. In any event, I just invite you to decide for yourselves. Thank you for listening.